going to be using the serial port at all? It doesn't sound like it, right?
No, we're not.
Okay, real port is our patented protocol and driver for COM port emulation. So if you needed to access the serial port through an application that can only talk to a COM port, that's how you do it. Some people will prefer to disable completely SNMP, or at least disable unsecure SNMP version 1. And, if you're using version 3, then just disable whichever SNMP that you're not using. The transport has a built-in time server. So, for example, if the transport was for some reason getting the time, for example, through GPS, which the WR21 really, I guess it could do that, but it's generally not used for that. You can actually set up the transport as a time server itself. Generally, again, you don't do that. You probably don't want to disable SSH, but you can. Oddly enough, in the product today, you cannot disable Telnet. You can either allow it to be in the open, or you can do it over SSL. Most people prefer not to use Telnet at all. And for that, I'll show you in a few minutes basically how to block it through the firewall. And that's the default anyway.
Bill, are you able to change the default Telnet port?
Yes, there are ways to do that. And again, that's through the firewall. And I'll show you how to do that.
Okay.
Very, very cool. In fact, since you're going to be using the firewall, I'll show you some stuff on doing your port forwarding through the firewall instead. It's actually a better way to do port forwarding. It really behaves the same, but if you're going to be using the firewall anyway, it gives you just more flexibility and power over doing port forwarding through the firewall. And I'll show you that in a little bit. Again, on the web server, you can choose to use either HTTP or HTTPS. Good morning, Eric.
Morning. How are you guys doing?
All right, we already started. That's fine.
How's it going, Eric? Daniel and Zach over here.
Good. How are you guys?
Pretty good. Just getting the rundown from Bill on security, so
awesome.
It's good stuff.
That's great. Yeah, the transport is a pretty feature-rich product, so I think this is a really good idea.
Yeah, no, it seemed very nice, and again, we told Bill that we were able, to play around with it a little bit, and I think we've got the gist of it, but we just want to make sure, I'm sure there's always lots of cool hidden gems of features in any product that are sort of glazed over or missed if you're not really looking for them. So we're really enjoying Bill's insight into what extra things we can play around with.
Yep, and he's been doing it a long time, so he knows the gotchas and the pitfalls and things like that with cellular networks and how to counteract that. So
cool.
And again, yeah, thanks, Eric. So again, here I mentioned that you can use either HTTP or HTTPS. You can completely disable the web server. I think most people probably prefer to not do that anyway. But that capability is there. And again, anything that you can't natively disable or change, you can do through the firewall. So, for example, you mentioned, well, you want to change the Telnet port to something else. Well, we can do that through port forwarding on the firewall. Now, let me also mention something that, again, this thing's got so many features. As long as I have been doing this, as Eric said, I tend to forget things myself sometimes. The other thing to remember is that the transport on most of the major services that you use to get to the transport itself, particularly the CLI and the web UI stuff, will listen on port 8000 plus that normal port. So 8022, 8023, 8080, and 8443. So, for example, and I'll show you my firewall on one of my devices in a few minutes, but I don't allow port 22. And if you're on a public IP address, it's static, you absolutely want to block port 22, because hackers, for some reason, these guys in China, Russia, and other parts of the world love to try to get into your system on port 22. And even though you've got a good secure password on the unit, you're still going to sit there and try to hammer on it. So just changing the port to only allow 8022 in, they don't bother me anymore. And that's kind of odd that they hadn't figured that out. But so I'll show you that rule in a few minutes. The rest of the stuff default you don't need to worry about. So that's under network services. Obviously, from a secure standpoint, depending on what you've got connected to it and the type of things that you're communicating to, you're pushing through data to something that's got a static IP address, right?
Not all the time, but we are considering making that a standard. So I guess that's partially why we're doing this. We're considering and slightly changing our processes if it means a better product, and if the modem has some benefit to that, we can definitely make that happen.
Okay, well you can disable the DHCP server simply by clearing this checkbox.
Okay.
If you're going to make any changes to the DHCP server, do that first. I've had people who will go and change the Ethernet IP address, and there's probably no reason for you to do that if you're doing simple port forwarding. But if you go change this Ethernet port IP address, and that's the network you're connected to, well, as soon as you click apply down here, you will lose connectivity to it. So you change the DHCP server first, but as I mentioned, you can disable it. And note that there are multiple DHCP servers here. By default, only DHCP server on Ethernet 0 is enabled. And depending on whether your unit has 1 or 2 Ethernet ports, you may not actually see this option. But I don't have, for example, by default, it's not enabled here. And there are also logical Ethernet interfaces that you can use for various things. So even though your unit only has physically 1 or 2 Ethernet ports, it has virtually up to 10. And you can actually have DHCP servers on those. I don't think I've ever seen anybody actually do that, but you can. On Wi-Fi units, that's typically where we see that type of thing used, where you're tying the physical Wi-Fi interface to a virtual Ethernet interface. Let's see what else I can show you here. You can identify your own DNS servers. Generally, the transport itself is a DNS server. You could almost call it a DNS proxy, where when we connect to the mobile network using PPP, we'll pull in the DNS information from the carrier, and then we proxy that to DNS clients behind the transport. And again, you have full control over that on here. You've already discovered the IP routing and forwarding by doing your IP forwarding and static NAT mappings. And again, in a few minutes, I'll show you another way to do that. Let's see. VPN. Are you guys looking to do any kind of VPN stuff?
No, not really through the modem. No.
Okay. I recommend staying away from it if you can, but if you need it, it's there. If you have the enterprise version of the WR21, and I hope you do, especially for the firewall capabilities. Here you have control over the SSH server, so you can change the SSH server port here if you need to. Remember, it's also listing on 8022, so you don't have to physically make that change here, but if you wanted to change the SSH port to something other than 22 or 8022, this is where you can do it.
Cool.
There's an SSH client built in. There's no way to disable it, but again, you can block it.
Got it. Yeah.
You don't need to worry about FT. I'm sorry?
I was just going to say, it just sounds like the firewall is a very powerful tool. And I actually, Zach and I did look at it and played around with it a bit. But I think, obviously it does require some training on. So, obviously do your thing. But yeah, I would love to really get a good handle on the firewall, or at least have a good starting point for me to sort of teach myself, because it's almost coding at that point. So it seems like a very powerful tool. We just need to get a better handle of it.
It is its own. You're right. It is its kind of own language, if you will.
Right.
One thing I want to quickly touch on first are users, and obviously the first thing you want to do is change the standard username, password, and you can this used to be long ago used for kind of a backdoor. We have since eliminated that. So user 0 is available. Let's talk a little bit about the user levels. And these aren't as clearly defined in the user guide as I wish they were. But super is, I think, self-explanatory. That's where you can make any change to the device, do whatever you need to do. Low, medium, and high sort of vary what commands are executable by the user. And then there's one called read-only. And I think this is pretty powerful because this gives you the ability to assign an administrator who can go and monitor things on the transport but not make any changes.
Right.
What's kind of a quick snippet of the user levels. On the transport, the firewall, and first of all, it's important to note that by default, the firewall is not enabled. And note you can enable it on any interface. So we have tons of customers who will use a transport Ethernet port as a LAN interface as primary. It may be connected to satellite, DSL, cable modem, whatever. The mobile interface on most every transport is PPP1. So you want to make sure that you enable the firewall on PPP1. Also note that you can enable the firewall on a GRE interface if you're using GRE. So you would enable that, you would apply that. So let's go to the transport firewall itself. We do include a sample firewall file for you on the device, and this is what it looks like.
Mm-hmm.
The rules that are highlighted or in italics preceded by a pound sign are almost always, there's a few exceptions, almost always a comment, self-explanatory. And I strongly recommend that you do that.
Okay.
The reason this first rule here, rule 2 actually, is there is to allow the transport to communicate FTP through to any client, and that is going both ways. And the reason it's there is because we need to have this FTP control port handled dynamically. The flags basically are to help control and monitor sends and acts. The most important statement here is this inspect state. Any outbound rule needs to have inspect state on it, so you don't have to have the corresponding return rule on it. And that basically is what the stateful inspection firewall does for us. It greatly simplifies your rules. Not all rules need that inspect state. Basically, things that aren't TCP or UDP typically don't need it. This rule here, Rule 4, essentially says I'm going to allow all outbound traffic initiated behind the transport or from the transport itself, and I'm going to set up the stateful inspection to allow the return traffic back in. So pass means just that.
Mm-hmm.
Out is the direction it's going. So if I enable the firewall on PPP1, this traffic is going out to PPP1. Break end almost always go together, and what this says is when I see this rule matches, break, stop processing rules, and go to the end of the rule set. Okay?
Got it.
Again, I explained what the inspect state is. So notice, just like any firewall, when you enable the firewall on this interface, the default rule is to block. So every rule in this
mm-hmm.
are to pass traffic.
Right. Right. So, by default, things are blocked and you're just sort of opening up things, either outbound or what have you. Got it.
That is correct. That is correct. The very last rule is there really just for your peace of mind, but more importantly, it has this log context in it. And what this log context says is I'm going to log any entries that hit firewall rule number 16 into the firewall log.
Okay.
I'll show you that in a few minutes. Let me go to another device here that's on my network. Because it's actually a live active unit that I'm using to communicate right now with you.
while we're on this page, Bill, just one really quick thing I noticed on the home screen is that that plugin, I guess that Flash plugin, is that really a big deal? I try to enable it, I guess, like allowing Java to work on the page, and it just doesn't work. I don't think it's important, but
I think in the latest release, I think in the latest release of the firmware, we got rid of that.
Okay.
It used to be what it was there for, and because of all the issues that people have had with Java, it would show you a graphic representation of the front panel of the transport with the blinky lights and the signal strength and all that stuff.
Right.
Kind of cool.
That's what I kind of gathered from the manual, but I didn't see it explicitly stated. So I just wanted to make sure that's not a big deal, or if I'm doing something wrong on my end.
No.
Okay.
Oh, in fact, like I just said, later versions of the firmware, we have disabled that.
Okay.
I don't even get that message here. I just got a blank there.
Got it. No worries. Sorry, go ahead.
So this is on my active router here, and I just kind of wanted to show you some rules for various things that I've stuck in here at some point in time. Protocol 47, I believe that's GRE if I remember correctly. I had that in there for some reason. So I'm allowing Protocol 47 in. Again, notice it's in. So I was doing some testing with GRE.
Got it.
To allow that traffic in. Here are port forwarding rules, okay? So this one says if I get anything on protocol TCP and it's coming in on port 8045, redirect that to 172.16.5.44. So on my local network here, if you notice in my address bar, it's 172.16.5.
Right.
So I'm saying if that traffic comes in to address-PPP1, and actually I don't think I actually really need that part of the rule in there. I want to forward that through to this new address, and I want to translate the port from 8045 to 80. When you enter port 80 in to the firewall rule,
yep,
it automatically changes it in the web UI to say HTTP.
Oh, I see. So that isn't like something you define someplace else. It just converts it automatically to whatever the convention is.
Yeah.
Got it.
Yeah.
Okay. Great.
So this gives you a sample of, this is the kind of rule that you're looking to do with port 40.
Yes, absolutely. This is really great stuff. Yeah, no, I mean, like...
Think the node. Yeah.
Yeah, you're definitely on the money, Bill. I mean, we're trying to... I guess it would be really great if we had some way, and possibly we can go into this later or maybe a separate meeting, but it would be really great if there was a way... the thing is, these get configured not by us directly, but by our panel shop, and if we can sort of systemize... Right now, they sort of configure our modems, sort of box per box, not really in mass, but what they have to do is log into the web interface and configure everything, pretty much by hand. If there was some way we can have these rules sort of uploaded or copied over from like maybe a clone device to a new device, I don't know if that's possible, but that would be really great because it's really one great thing to leverage these features, but it's another thing that we might use on a very special case-by-case basis if there's like a very complex site or a site that has very high needs in terms of security. But if we can just do it for all of our boxes, that would even be better. Sort of standardize on it.
Your wish is my desire.
Awesome.
Okay, so go into administration, backup, restore.
Okay.
I recommend including the passwords file because the passwords file is an obfuscated file called pwds.da0.
Okay.
And then you just simply click backup. And you can name this file whatever you want. Open file. No, I don't open it with that. Save it. Where did it save it? All right, Windows Explorer. Why did you do that to me? Or Firefox? Where does Firefox save files? downloads folder. And you can see I've done this a few times. So it's called back CFG.
Got it.
Again, you can call it whatever you want. The files that are here, the two main files, well actually the three, are config.da0, fw.txt, ewds.da0. Okay?
Got it.
When you get and the way you're doing it,
Talking
since you're
about
doing NAT
Cloning
440,
modems.
Like config files.
the network that's sitting behind the transport on Ethernet can always be the same. So it can always be 192.168.1.0 because that address isn't visible from the outside world anyway because you're pushing things through NAT.
Right.
So really every, and I know you may have some site-specific or customer-specific things that might change, but for the most part, you can do exactly what you're talking about. And then this config.da0 file here, you can unzip this file, and these become discrete files, and you can simply edit anything you might need in here. And the config, these are text-based config files.
Mm-hmm.
So here's the actual config file, and it's got some stuff in here that's what we call hardware specific, depending on what module is in the unit. And sometimes that's kind of nice because in some cases you can somewhat replicate what that is. And it's going to vary somewhat based on which product you're using. But here, and this, by the way, is a unit of mine, an old DR64 that we no longer make that actually has DSL built into it. It's been replaced by a newer unit. But, this is the primary part of the configuration that's different from our factory default
Okay.
part. So here you can see how things are set up.
Right at the top there, yep.
That's the config file.
Okay.
And then here's the firewall file. So here you can see these are the same rules that I showed in the web interface. So you can actually go in with a text editor and modify these rules as needed.
Very nice.
And you can re-zip this file and then use the same context to restore it. Now, there's another way you can do this as well. So see here, you would you would browse for that file, and you would select that file, and then you would then just click restore, and it would pull that zip file back in and reboot the unit with the new config on it. So that's one way to do your cookie cutter. The other way to do it is to extract these files discretely. Okay, and oh, by the way, these are, some of these have to do with this has to do with logcodes.diff, has to do with some things that the event handler can do for creating alarms, and I've made some modifications to it.
And Bill, those would be alarms through the cloud service, or are those local alarms?
No, those are local alarms. Things
Okay.
that you might do there's all sorts of alarms you can do on here based on certain events, and I can show you that in just a minute. Let me kind of finish here with this idea, but you can take these files here, okay, and you can copy them onto your USB stick, and you can create a file, for example, called autoexec.bat.
Mm-hmm.
And autoexec.bat, there are 3 commands. And actually, you wouldn't need all those because you really just need, well, it doesn't hurt to do them all, but essentially you would have commands in this autoexec.bat script on the USB stick that would say copy space u:config.da0 space config.da0. U: is the USB drive. And what it will do is, if it's called autoexec.bat, it will automatically, as soon as you stick that USB stick in the USB port of the WR21, it will automatically copy those files
Awesome.
as soon as you insert that USB stick. So that's one way that a lot of people do their configuration, because it's really quick and easy, and the person doing it doesn't really even have to think. All
Right.
they need to do is power the transport up, let it boot up, get to a quiescent state maybe after about 2 minutes or so, and then stick the USB stick in there. So that's one way to do it. You can also call that file pb2.bat, for example, for push button twice. So the little reset button on the front of the WR21, if you click it a couple of times rather quickly, it will execute that file. Most people, I think, prefer that because it's a little safer than the autoexec.bat, but you get the idea, right?
Absolutely. That's a great win for us.
Okay. And some of this is outlined in the user guide, and some of it I've got some documentation I can give you on that. But again, you know, the key files are config.da0, fw.txt, and pwds.da0. If you're doing standard factory default stuff and you're just making your own changes to it, those are the only 3 files that you really need to be concerned about. The rest of them are default files that rarely does anybody ever change on them.
Got it.
Okay. What else can I show you, gentlemen?
I don't know. That's really great, Bill. I mean, you pretty much covered what we were mainly interested in. If you wanted to talk a little bit about the alarms and exactly what the benefit of those are and what you might recommend, that could be helpful for us in terms of determining whether or not we want to include that as part of our new process.
The way that the transport handles alarms, first let's kind of look at the event log. So when you go to the event log on the transport, you'll see that there are certain events in here that, you know, some are fairly straightforward, some don't really mean anything to anybody.
Like, in the firewall settings, like determine what
but
goes
for
in the
example,
log.
you might want to create an
enable
alarm
and say
based
if,
on
like,
a
this rule
login
blocks
failure.
something, like log it.
What's
That's
in,
odd
in the
because I
event
don't
log you're
remember
talking about?
Yeah.
having a login failure. Maybe somebody tried to hack into my system yesterday, and I kept them out.
Good to know.
So you can go into the alarm section. First of all, there are event settings, and this is it's a little cumbersome to kind of follow. I hate to use the word cumbersome, but it can be a little daunting to you when you first start looking at how these alarms are set up.
Mm-hmm.
But you want to probably never change this part here. But the thing is, you can send your alarms as either email notifications, SNMP traps, or SMS messages, or all the above. Any alarm, first of all, you have to realize that anything that you want, any event that you want to alarm on must go into the event log, which just makes sense, and that's kind of the default.
Right.
Then you can get into what are called the event log codes, and this is the part that sometimes starts to make people's heads spin a little bit with all the complexity that's here, but it's also very powerful and very flexible.
Mm-hmm.
So when you look, there's an event description, and this is the primary event. Power up. Well, that's pretty self-explanatory, right? And I forget what the %C context is. I can go back and look at the event log to remind myself. And then there's different reasons why it may have powered up. Well, somebody might have told it to reboot from the web. So you can actually go in here and create an alarm based on that. And the way it's done is it has to do with the alarm priority. And I don't really have time today to get into the full details of it, but it gives you that capability to go in and create any event that's on the transport and turn it into an alarm so that you can get notified, again, through email, SNMP, and or SMS.
Got it. No, that's very, very cool.
And I've got on setting these up. So the one I mentioned, and how do I go back here? Here we go. The one I mentioned was login failure. So here's where I would go in and create again an event. And notice that I can create an event either on the event itself or by a reason. And this is where you get into this alarm priority will determine which alarms actually get emailed or you get a message on.
Right. Right, based on the settings that you well, put in the event settings, right? Sent over email or SMS.
Exactly.
Got it. No, that's very cool, and I totally understand, Bill. That's sort of a whole thing unto itself, but it's great to know that that capability is built in there, and it's as flexible as it is. So that's really awesome.
Sure.
So thanks for.
The other the other cool things that you can do is you can attach a snapshot or even store a snapshot of either the analyzer or the event log or both in the message that you're getting, emails specifically, right? And this is helpful for troubleshooting. We've used this in the past to help customers who were having some kind of issue, for example. And I don't know whether you've taken a look at the analyzer or not, but I'm going to kind of jump to that because this is one of the really, really, really cool things on the transport is the analyzer. This is a full packet capture tool built right into the transport. For the settings, you can go in and you can create filters. So, for example, I really probably only care to capture frames on PPP1. And actually, I don't want PPP interfaces. This is an important thing to know. Typically, you're only concerned about IP sources. So, for example, if you were troubleshooting some port forwarding and you wanted to see, okay, I'm not seeing the traffic I want to see come in on Ethernet 0 and go out PPP1 or vice versa, right? So I would check those two interfaces. And then I can do filters. So I can say, here I'm filtering out these services. So I don't want to see web traffic. I don't want to see my VPN traffic created by my PC sitting behind it, nor do I want to see DNS traffic. If I wanted to filter in those things, I precede them by a tilde. So that says filter in. And therefore, I go down and I apply that, and I save the changes. And by the way, that's something I didn't really discuss, but I think you probably figured this out. Clicking apply just makes that change effective on the running configuration.
Mm-hmm.
If you want to save it so when you reboot it's still there, then you click save. I'm not going to do that now, but you get the idea.
Yep.
So then I go to the trace itself. And the trace itself, which I don't have anything in there because today all my traffic has been bad. Actually, it's because I didn't capture anything. Okay, I will turn that on then. So let me just give you a sample of, I don't want to do that. So I will apply that. I'm not going to save it. I will apply it. And more than likely now I have some traffic. Yep. So there you go. So it captured these frames. I don't have a clue what this traffic is. There's not much telling. Whatever 1853 is, I could go look it up.
Right.
And the other cool part about this is I can go and do a PCAP trace of this traffic. And I can say, okay, I want to look at the IP traffic.
Mm-hmm.
Open it with Wireshark. And there's that traffic in Wireshark. So this makes troubleshooting very easy on the transport.
That's great. Yeah, I mean, even for us, like, this stuff might be a little more tech savvy than what we're used to, but we actually do have quite a few clients that are really looking into something like this in terms of their on-site security or being able to see exactly what's going on. And we've gotten quite a big push from especially some of our larger clients with larger sites, particularly on the utility side. So this is really great that you have this capability. I'm pretty sure, would you consider this kind of the norm, or is the transport kind of going above and beyond what typical cell modem routers offer, at least in the commercial industrial space?
I think the transport probably blows away most any quote-unquote cellular modem out there.
Okay.
There are some folks who are somewhat catching up to some of the capabilities of the transport, but most of them are still pretty far behind, especially in something that's as small and industrial grade as the transport. Of course, you could go buy a Cisco or a Juniper router that would have, probably even more security capabilities on them just based on what they do.
Right.
But not really. Those are bigger, more expensive routers that
right.
Really we compete with, and most utilities prefer to use our product because they're smaller, less expensive, and more robust.
Absolutely. That's great. That's awesome, Bill.
So I'm going to go back to the firewall just a minute because, it seems our focus is, really kind of on that. And I wanted to point out a couple things kind of got derailed there.
Mm-hmm.
On the firewall, you'll notice the first column is the hit counter. And again, in troubleshooting things, it's really pretty critical to understand that. You can see that most all my traffic, which is pretty common in the kind of, I'm sitting on a PC behind this router,
mm-hmm.
is all outbound traffic. The only other rule that's really being hit is this rule, which I guess that's somebody maybe trying to get into my system. May need to look at changing that or blocking 8080 or maybe going back to HTTPS. I don't know why it turned off HTTPS. But the other one that's pretty critical, again, this log, see this log here? We've got 792 hits against my last rule, which is blocking everything. Well, I want to see who's trying to hack into my system. So I go under network status, and I go to the firewall trace. And this is where I can see these people who are trying to get into my system, whether legitimate or not letting them in. So I could go through here, and I bet money I could find most of you can see is web traffic trying to get in, trying to hack into my. I guess they're trying to hack in. I could go research this source IP address and find out who it is. But anyway, that just is another place in the transport where we're logging things that can be used for diagnostics, troubleshooting, and security.
Absolutely.
While I'm on this network status page here, let me go back to this other unit over here because it's more applicable. And I'm going to log back in. By the way, there is a timer on this to automatically log you out after I think it's 5 minutes. Some of it's adjustable, some of it's not. So if I go to network status, mobile, here's where you get the mobile information. And depending on the module, it's going to tell you a lot of information, some more than others. So my signal strength here is neg 88, which is really not very good. It's marginal.
Mm-hmm.
And this is a module I've got set up to be on the Sprint network currently. And this is important troubleshooting information. The other thing is, some people like to execute commands, and this box does have a full command line, so if I were to Telnet or SSH to it, or even connect directly to the serial port, as I am here, I can do things like, here's a route print.
Got it.
I can show the running config. So this shows the running configuration of the unit. But I can also do the same thing here, because sometimes it's easier to execute a command and get what you want out of it than it is to try to fumble around through the web interface.
Mm-hmm.
And some things just simply aren't available through the web interface. So I can do a route print here and see it returns the same thing. Under file management, this is where you can go and look at the files that are on the unit, and most everything that you would be ever concerned about is in the flash directory. And one of the key files that if you ever work with Digi tech support or even myself, they may ask for the debug.txt file. And an easy way to grab it, you can either do it through FTP or you can simply right-click here and you can do save link as, and then you can send that to Digi support.
Excellent.
But what it is, it's kind of a macro command that builds a lot of information about the transport itself, including the configuration and your firewall. So it kind of puts it in a text file to make it easy to read.
Great. Hopefully we won't have to use that too often, but that's good to know.
Yeah, hopefully not. But
Yeah.
it's there if you need it.
Absolutely.
And our tech support is very good, by the way.
That's also really good to know, because we'll run into issues, I'm sure. So whether on our part or our customers' part, we'll definitely be reaching out at some point. So that's great to know that you guys are receptive to that.
Oh, sure. Here's one other thing that I strongly recommend taking a look at. So under date and time, and you're going to be dealing with, I think you said you guys deal with utilities quite a bit,
Mm-hmm.
and they're pretty particular about the time that their devices have. So one of the best ways to do that is to use something called SNTP, Simplified Network Time Protocol. And the reason I recommend SNTP versus NTP is because SNTP isn't as obnoxious about checking for the time every few minutes.
Right.
SNTP can use a lot of data. You don't realize it, but when it reaches out every few seconds to check the time, that, even though it's a few bytes of information, that builds up over time. SNTP, all right, so maybe it's not quite as accurate because it only checks every so often, depending on how frequently you want it to, but still it maintains a very good time on the unit. And you have to configure the SNTP server, and there are several out there. The NIST, for example, has them, and several universities do. I think we even maintain our own now, which we redirect, and I think it's time.ethereos.com is the way it does. I think new units may actually come configured that way, but you can override that.
Okay. Great.
Again, you've got tons and tons of things you can do here. You can auto-run commands. For example, if you were to create a Python script to do something, and we do support Python, which is an open-source programming language.
Mm-hmm.
We have customers who do Python scripts, do all sorts of customization on their unit. And if you did that, you would auto-start that Python script here, or whatever script you might have.
The little locust.
This is where you change the automatic log out right here. Public utilities, for example, will require, when you log into Telnet or SSH, a pre- and post-login banner, which essentially is a text file that says, you're logging into this unit, whatever you do can be held against you, or whatever you want to say. So lots of different things in here.
Cool.
And I could ramble on and on and on, but anything specific, again, that you guys want to see while we're looking here?
The only thing I would have in mind, and I think it just kind of came to mind from maybe something that I saw on that page, is, a lot of the time we're troubleshooting with an installer over the phone, not necessarily having any eyes ourselves, and we want to make it as simple and easy as possible to really figure out what's going on without logging into the modem itself. Now, obviously, there are some LEDs, on the modem in terms of signal strength. I don't have it in front of me, but probably carrier detection, power, all sorts of other things. Is there anything you recommend that is tweakable, or anything in particular that you find very helpful in terms of external troubleshooting with the hardware, or is it pretty straightforward?
It's actually pretty straightforward. Let me think the best way for me to show you this. You don't have the unit in front of you, so
I can get one. Just one second. Let me grab it.
Yeah. So the most obvious thing is the power LED. If you don't have that on, then you're not going to be doing anything. And oh, by the way, does your unit come with did it come with a barrel style power cord?
It did.
and you notice it's twist and lock.
Yes, we did notice that.
That is probably the number one most important thing to make sure your installers know, to twist and lock. Because a lot of people miss that, and they say, oh, your power connector's crappy, what's wrong with it?
Right.
No, if you twist and lock, it's not.
And
so power is the first thing.
It won't power on unless it's twisted and locked, or is it just more prone to moving around in there and not having a good connection?
Yeah, so that it will actually. If you just take that bayonet connector and just push it up there and don't necessarily lock it in, it will come on.
Okay.
But it's very easy, just to even tap the unit and that come out. So,
got it.
It's important to line those tabs up and twist it and lock it to make it in there very secure. But don't over twist it. We've also had customers who, for some reason, think that, just like they do sometimes with the antenna connector, think it's a wrench, and they want to tighten it and tighten it. Things are made not to tighten beyond where they're supposed to be. So it's very simple. It just goes about 90 degrees and it'll stop. The next is, obviously, the next most important is the signal LEDs on the front. There are 3.
Mm-hmm.
And you want to have a minimum of 2, really, for best performance. And I forget what, I think there's a table on what those LEDs relate to as far as RSSI. One is it'll work fair. 2 is it'll work good, and 3 is it's going to work as well as it possibly can. So 3 is what you want, 2 marginal, 1 iffy, and obviously if you don't see any, it might not necessarily mean that there's no signal, but it's low enough where it's not going to work.
Got it.
And it does take about a minute for it to register on the network and come up, and it varies based on what technology is being used and what module's in. For example, LTE can actually take a few seconds longer than connecting to 3G, for example. The other blinky LED on the front, labeled as WWAN, blinks in a pattern that supposedly tells you what technology is in use. And right now, the one on the front of mine is blinking 1, 2, 3 times, which I think means I'm on EBDO, which is 3G on Sprint. The other important one is the service LED. The service LED will come on and stay on solid once it connects to the network. In other words, it gets its mobile IP address. And that's evident in the event log when you see this statement here, PPP1 up.
Got it. Yeah, I mean, something we run into a lot, and maybe this is something that will sort of get past us if we were to implement sort of the config file process that you showed us before, but a lot of the time there might be some PPP setting that's slightly off, or maybe the APN was fat fingered, and then obviously I think we'll get signal in that case, but what LED like behavior do you expect in that situation?
When the APN is off?
Yeah, something like that.
Well, yeah, so if the APN is misconfigured, the service light, so what's the service light? I need to check this. I asked that they change this how it behaves, but the service light used to, when it was attempting the connection, it would come on, but it would go off. So you kind of had to watch it.
Okay.
And that's what you will see. And what you will see in the event log, you would see something in the event log that would say TPP1 down, authentication failure, for example. And that would be a pretty good hint that they have, as you said, fat fingered the APN.
Right. Okay.
Any other PPP settings? In fact, let's just quickly look at that while we're on that subject. Any of the other PPP settings or the mobile settings really don't ever need to be changed. Now, I'm on a CDMA unit, so it's kind of hard for me to show you, but
right.
Very rarely do any of these mobile settings, other than the enable firewall on this interface, which you can do from the firewall config page. If you were using IPsec, you would enable that. You've already figured out probably the IP address and port stuff.
Right.
That needs to be checked if you're doing port forwarding. But none of the rest of this really ever comes into play. The only thing that might come into play, and I'm glad. See, I tend to forget things that are important. The thing that you might get into is this reestablish the connection if no data is received for a period of time. That would tell the transport that, hey, there's communication has been lost, and I don't know why this isn't enabled by default. But for example, you might want to make this something like 1 hour. So if the transport hasn't received any data for 1 hour, what it will do is it will bring down the PPP session and attempt to reestablish it. Now, let me take this a step further, and this is even better and more important. Built into the wizard on the box is something called the SureLink wizard. And this takes just a second to load here, running a Python program. I strongly recommend if you have sites that are susceptible to connection problems, really, I recommend this for every installation, is to do SureLink. And essentially what SureLink is, it is a mechanism in the transport to essentially detect a dead link. And it says here there are 2 types of dead link detection techniques to choose from. One is a passive technique. And the passive technique is cool because it uses the firewall, the stateful inspection capabilities of the firewall to detect whether traffic is being sent and received. So for example, if you're doing polling at a regular interval, it'll use that traffic to verify that capability, that it's actually passing traffic. And what will happen is whether you're using the passive or the active technique, which actually generates traffic from the transport itself, and it's really a more reliable mechanism, it will bring down the mobile session and attempt to reestablish it. And as you walk through this wizard, it gives you all sorts of things to use to determine which way you want to do. So let's say I'm going to do active, which again is the most reliable, although it does generate traffic, which is billable traffic, by the way.
Yep.
So you have the capability to generate pings, a UDP echo request, and I'd have to look more at this one. Yeah, that one you wouldn't use, and you wouldn't use IPsec. So you're going to use either a ping or a UDP echo test. Most people will use a ping. I'll say next. And then it's going to ask me, well, what is my primary address to ping? And I strongly recommend you put 2 in here, or whatever address it might be. These defaults are really good, so I'm going to ping every 2 minutes. I'm going to wait 10 seconds. If I don't get any pings back within 60 seconds, I'm going to assume that this is a dead link, and I'm going to do it 5 times, or 5 seconds. And again, I recommend a backup address, and you might want to change to it like after 5 failed attempts. And then when you click finish, I'm going to do it. I'm going to be brave. I'm going to go do this. It's going to need to disconnect because it's going to change some of the behavior of the transport. So it's going to disconnect from the network. And I will see that the service LED will go off. And there it goes off. I'm not going to save the settings. And again, sometimes it's good not to save settings because if you're messing around with something and you're not sure what the behavior might be, if you lock yourself out of it, for example, you can simply reboot it.
Right. Yep. And there's also, I guess, that there are multiple setting templates or, I guess, profiles or styles in that drop-down menu, which I thought was very cool. I didn't see that very often, so.
Yep, that's correct.
Pretty cool.
So here, these are actually the changes that I just made through that wizard. If I was to go into the command line and manually make these changes in the command line, this is the command that I would enter and just take out the word 2. So I just change the configuration. Now I have a PPP space 1 space ping interval 120 seconds.
Got it.
It closed the config. I mean, it closed PPP1, sorry. it manually brought it down, and it says CLI request, but it was really through the Python program that I was running there in that wizard. And then it comes right back up, and it took it all of 9 seconds to come down and come back up.
Got it. Is the reason that I don't want to go off topic, and obviously we can definitely go down a rabbit hole with this, but is the reason that the timestamp there is off is just because we were messing around, or maybe didn't input a particular like SMTP server?
You mean the reason that I'm on 1 January 2000?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
I don't have a time server set up on this, and I've been lazy and I haven't set the time on this particular unit. So
okay. No, fair enough.
Is that to 1 January 2000? Yeah.
Okay, it defaults to that. Great. Good to know.
Yeah. No, it's a Y2K bug. No, I'm just kidding.
Got it.
Not a Y2K bug.
Cool. That's
why. If I go back to my other unit, which log back in. Oh, see, I've got it. I think I've got it set to. No, it's set right.
Yep. Great. That's awesome.
Yeah.
Just trying to get a good handle of this. So, no, it's actually, Bill, I actually really like the interface. It's there are things that are, it's kind of hard to get around having things all over the place, but I do like the expandable menus. That's something I don't see very often, and you can kind of select what you want to look at least on one page at a time.
Yeah, well, we are working again to, there's an active project going on in engineering right now to help improve that. Eric, I don't know if you're still listening or not. You've probably gone to sleep by now, but called UET, UET, and we actually used the same process years ago to improve how our terminal and the device servers look. And just a little bit of history, when we bought the company Starion Systems, and you will see bits that mention Starion or SAROS, and that's a company we acquired about 6 years ago to get the transport. Mm-hmm. You should have seen the interface when we bought the company. It was all listed alphabetically.
Oh, God.
Instead of by function.
Got it. Yep. Okay, I mean, it's not bad. I mean, like you said, maybe it could be improved, but, these things are really hard to nail down, and I don't mind it too much either. So this is exactly why we're doing this. Like, you just navigating around there, just seeing it visually and not just in screenshots or text makes all the difference in improving our comfort level. So thanks for that.
So let me, I think you guys have already, you say you've already looked at the user guide.
Yes.
And just a little comment about the user guide. Let me just kind of, I've got a copy here.
Well, he was pulling that up.
Sorry?
Oh, go ahead, sorry.
So you may have noticed that the user guide is laid out somewhat functionally based on the web interface. Mm-hmm. Some people like command line stuff better. So if you went, for example, into the static route section and you're looking at it, here's where you lay out the static routes. And if you go down to the end of that section, it's got the related CLI command. So I get in arguments with some of our documentation folks who say, well, we need a CLI reference. Well, we probably do, but it's all in the user guide.
Right.
And obviously using the find function is your friend. So the other thing I wanted to point out, since we were talking about, here's the alarm configuration setting. And a coworker of mine, one of our support guys, wrote a really nice, somewhat simplified document on that. I don't know whether it's been posted or not. I'll go there in just a second. But the other thing I wanted to point out is the best place to learn about the firewall is actually in the firewall script section. And this talks about how the firewall stuff works, what all you can do with it. It goes into detail about some port forwarding things. You can build a very complex firewall rule set that even have tags in it. You can jump around in the firewall, and I've had to do that for customers. So it's really a very powerful mechanism. The other thing I wanted to point out is that on this documentation page, and I've got it linked directly, if you open the documentation tab, you will see various application notes in Windows Explorer. I need to go use a different browser. But anyway, you get the idea. There are various application notes here. Go away. And now it's going to go. Yeah, there we go. No, it's still there. Sorry. But you get the idea. There are various application notes for all sorts of things here, specific things. In fact, there's one on port forwarding.
Got it.
Yeah, so there's more detailed documentation in these quick notes and these application notes that are out there.
Jeez.
It's like, I guess, no compression at all.
Right.
No, that's great, Bill, and obviously,
Late,
yeah, we're definitely looking forward to educating ourselves as well. So thanks for pointing that out.
Sure.
Cool. Was there anything that you wanted to cover, Zach? I just want to make sure I'm not missing anything.
I don't think so. I had to step out for a second, but I think whatever I didn't see was probably covered during that time where I had to step out. But no, I think just this last part here, going over some of the guide and some of the knowledge base and application notes. It seems like there's a huge knowledge base overall. So I think anything that maybe wasn't covered here, we can definitely look up pretty easily. So yeah, I'm good from my side.
Yeah, and I think down the road, we don't have to do it now, but we have a lot of information to digest, but maybe at some point down the road, once we get maybe enough units out in the field with this and we feel comfortable, then we can possibly talk about, I guess, MX Cloud and if that's useful or not to us, or rather just the cloud service for the Digi.
Yeah, and we can certainly bring in one of our guys and have them train you on that, and you can determine whether that's something that you want to utilize or not.
Okay, yeah, it's very possible that we don't need to, but it's nice to have the option.
And by the way, you can go and let's see if I can get to the right place here. It's going to take me here.
Really quickly, can you give a quick overview of the areas right now where you are using cellular and where you see cellular going within your organization? I just want to make sure I have a clear understanding of that.
Yeah, absolutely. So Zach and I, in terms of Locust Energy, we work on sort of the commercial side of the business. So there are really kind of two halves of Locust. One is the enterprise side, which comprises of mostly residential and smaller solar PV sites on people's homes, or maybe like a small, like, I wouldn't even say a carport because that'd be more commercial, but pretty much anything outside of the residential space is taken up by the commercial team, which comprises me, Zach, a bunch of sales guys, Adrian DeLuca, if you've spoken to him, he's our manager on the commercial side, and that's going to cover anything from three-phase PV sites on commercial businesses to anything on the utility scale, like 10 megawatts and up. So obviously, in terms of the residential side, there's definitely a big push for cellular. Not everyone wants to use sort of, or rely on a homeowner's router or ISP. So more and more we've had the request for cellular in our boxes, and those boxes are kind of a separate business from the commercial side, but we do utilize some of that technology, and we've actually built out our own single phase and a three-phase version of our socket meter with their built-in data logger labeled the L-Gate, and it actually has a cell modem built in. So that's really taken care of on the enterprise side. Now, on the commercial side, we do use that socket meter on some smaller three-phase commercial sites. However, with the larger ones, we tend to use like a NEMA-rated enclosure with a separate data logger. Currently, we're using the obvious Aqua Suite, and a 3-phase meter that's CT based. So it's all sort of DIN rail mounted inside this NEMA rated enclosure. You know, and a lot of the time, you know, there might be internet access through the business, or, you know, we might be out in a large field for a ground mount site in particular, and they don't have any internet out there. So a lot, you know, we're using cellular quite a lot now. I wouldn't be able to give you any real numbers, but very roughly, I would say a little more than half are using cell modems at the moment, maybe around the half-mile mark. So it's definitely becoming more and more prevalent, especially as it's kind of the standard on our enterprise business. It's becoming more expected, and the value in cellular is being recognized by our partners who are having the ease of installation on the residential side and kind of want to expand that into the commercial side. So we've been using cellular modems in our 3-phase boxes for a while now, but it's become definitely more standard, and we're selling a lot more of them now. So we're just trying to get a better handle of how to manage those on, you know, sort of a standardized basis. And, you know, in addition with cellular, we're getting the benefits of setting up some more in-house remote configuration, or I guess port forwarding with mobile terminated data. So that's become something that's been getting more popular. That's not as standardized right now. Most people will just care about data outbound, but we do have a few customers that have particular control devices on a site that need inbound connections, and in those cases we'll actually offer mobile terminated data APNs, but obviously that opens us up a little bit more in terms of unauthorized access. So that's why we're really trying to beef up our cell modem option, in particular with security, but also, you know, everything that comes along with it, you know, troubleshooting tools, ease of configuration, and also repeatability for our panel shop to crank these things out. So that's kind of where we're at right now.
Did you guys move from Ingenuity to a new company? Weren't you using Ingenuity to build up enclosures?
Yeah, we didn't move from a different one. We're just using one in addition to Ingenuity to have a few different versions of our box out there. So we are still using Ingenuity, just not as our only manufacturer.
Okay, got it.
And just one other thing to kind of touch upon Danny's comment. One thing related to cellular that we're seeing change, especially in site design, is where customers used to be using Modbus RTU a lot. We're seeing them change over and using Modbus TCP a lot more, so that they don't have to run shielded twisted pair wire. So where that becomes interesting is when we put a cell modem on there, obviously these devices are picking up an IP address from the modem, you know, rather than just pushing their data to the data logger and seeing the data that way. So it opens up a lot more room to be able to access devices remotely, and it just kind of changes the overall scope when those devices are communicating over TCP rather than RTU.
Yep. Okay, that makes sense.
Do you transport can do? Sorry, Eric. I was just going to comment that if you do have any legacy RTU devices out there, you know, serial Modbus RTU devices, we can do Modbus RTU to Modbus TCP bridging on the WR21.
Through the serial port?
Correct.
Got it.
It's good to know.
Yep.
So from a business standpoint, do you have like an estimation of how many of these you use on a yearly basis? I'm just trying to get a rough figure.
Yeah, I mean that number is definitely, you know, increasing pretty significantly year to year.
Yeah.
I'd say probably estimate maybe the next year to use between 100 and 200.
Okay. Yeah. That's a lot of solar installations.
Oh yeah, I mean, it's never ending, so we're trying to keep our heads above water here, and especially now since we're really starting to kick it into the high season, and it's only going to get faster paced from here until the end of the year. We definitely want to sort of I guess, reestablish ourselves and figure out what our priorities are and develop a systemized, repeatable process so we can kind of keep doing what we're doing and not get bogged down with troubleshooting issues or small details in terms of customized configuration, which is something we've had to do a lot for sites that have their own technical challenges. So that's why we're really trying to figure out a good platform for us to move forward with.
Well, we've been involved in the solar space for quite a while now, and we work with like the solar cities and big leasing companies. We work with SMA, Fronius, Power One. They all have our little XBRF module installed in them, and some of them are cellular gear. So pretty well, the technology is pretty well proven in the industry already. So.
Oh yeah, no, I mean you guys definitely.
We even have your Zigbee socket in your the meter you're talking about, your socket meter.
Oh really? I didn't even know that. I was under the impression we used a different chipset, but I guess you're talking about Zigbee, which I actually haven't had a lot of interaction with. So that's really cool to know.
Yeah, we worked with Mike on that, and your contract manufacturer with microcontrols or whatever they're called up in New Hampshire, I think.
Yep. Very cool.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Installed it. I don't think the actual module is in there, but the socket is installed in it, so that if you ever run into a situation where you need to communicate with a smart energy meter or smart energy inverter, if they implement smart energy protocol on there, you can swap in a XB module.
Got it. Okay, yeah, no, that definitely makes sense, and that would explain why I haven't really heard about it so much yet, but it seems like pretty good way to expand capabilities down the road, so very cool.
Yep.
It'd be very nice to standardize across the board, something that I think makes it easier for our customers, or not just for our customers, but us internally, so that's really good to know. Cool. Zach, was there anything else that we wanted to go over in this meeting?
I think Danny touched upon, I mean, the only thing we might want to have a follow-up on, but it's a whole different conversation, is, kind of what you're showing here with the device cloud and kind of the uses and benefits of that. But again, that's more kind of a down-the-road type of thing, not something essential to the, functionality that we need at the moment. So other than that, go ahead.
Sorry, I've got to go in like 5 minutes, and I did want to mention, that's a good point. So there's some good information here on, the Ethereos side, and again, Ethereos is a division of Digi International. And what you can do is you can go out here to the developer zone, and you can set yourself up an account, and you can manage 5 devices for free. And if you want to play around with Device Cloud, that's a great way to do it. And what you do is you go into your device, and actually when you go into the Device Cloud interface, which I don't have up at the moment, but you can click on Discover, and if that transports on the same network that you're running your PC on, that's you're communicating to the Device Cloud on, it will find it. If not, you just go into the device itself, and you go into Remote Management and Device Cloud, and the newer firmwares have a drop down, and you essentially just click to communicate to Ethereos.com, and the unit will put itself out there, and then you manually add your device to your account if it's not discovered automatically, and you do that based on either the MAC address or this thing called the device ID, which is essentially the MAC address.
Yep.
Awesome. Yeah, no, as a starting point, I think we'll definitely play around with that a bit. That sounds like a great kind of intro to it.
Sure.
Great.
Anything else?
No, I think that about does it. Bill, thank you so much for walking us through this. I think it's a really great platform, and I'm really digging all the different features that we have here, and especially if we can get as complex as we want and then just sort of clone the device and just make it standard across the board. That's like the big win for me, especially since there's a lot of coordinating with our panel shops that we deal with, both Ingenuity and DST. So having to manage that and also try to figure out configurations on a case-by-case basis or troubleshoot, any configuration issues on their side, that's going to save us a lot of time. So that's really, really great. So thank you for showing us all of that.
You're quite welcome.
And Eric, thanks for being on the call too. And any visibility that we can give you in terms of the direction that Locust is heading, we'd be happy to oblige. Adrian is also a great person to reach out to. So if you want, you could obviously, we can get you his contact information if need be, if you don't have it already, and we can definitely get you in touch with him, because he would definitely be more of the biz dev and numbers person in terms of our cellular implementation. So it's great having you on the call.
We're going to be probably out in the New York area in the next month, so I might be reaching out to you guys just to see if we could set up an on-site meeting so we can meet in person. I think we're really excited about working with you guys, and just let me know what else you need from a testing or just pricing or availability perspective. I think I lined you guys up with Express Systems. It's right there in New Jersey. They're one of our best distributors. So
excellent.
Okay.
Great. No, thank you, Eric. And I'm sure Zach and I would look forward to meeting you as well, and I'm sure Adrian would sit on that meeting too. So definitely keep us updated to when that might be, and we'll put something down.
Okay. Sounds great.
Awesome. All right.
Thanks again, guys. That was
Bill.
very informative, very much appreciated.
Very thorough. Thanks again.
All right, take care, y'all.
Yep,
All right,
you
bye.
too. Bye.
Okay.
Damn, kind of slipped up there.
With MX Cloud.
Well, the
Although,
funny
I mean,
thing is, like,
it's not going to be used for that.
they don't know that though,
Right.
because I'm sure Moxa makes a modem too.
Right.
So, like, oops,
Well, maybe
that's
that'll
not what you think.
Maybe that'll help us.
Yeah.
With